Hi, welcome back for another awesome day in biology. So today we're going to be starting up a new unit called the cell cycle. So with the cell cycle, we're going to explore a little bit more how our cells grow, how they develop, and also how they end up reproducing. So what happens, for example, like if you get a paper cut, how does your skin repair? How does it heal? How does it know what to do? So let's go ahead and get started. So if you go to your Schoology, for my class, you're going to be going to your notes folder, and that's where this notebook is going to be. And you can see that it says Pre-AP Biology Cell Cycle Notes. I went ahead and put a little post-it note here. When we go through notes, I'm going to be going through with you live for my class, and some other classes you may have a video recording. Just make sure if you're missing a portion of these notes to go ahead and check your Schoology folder for those recorded videos. So if I look through this notebook, I gave a variety of information here. So first off, on the second page, you can see there's a lot of vocabulary here that's going to help you as you go through this unit. Now, some of these words you may already know. For example, cancer. Okay, so that may be something that you've heard of. Maybe tumor. Maybe even mitosis. And if you're thinking of the movie Twilight, you may have heard about prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase. So I have a lot of vocab here for you to pick up along the way. And then on the right-hand side, I also have some learning objectives. So what is it that you're going to be learning during this unit? So let's go ahead and get started. So on slide number 3, I have a picture here of DNA. Now, DNA, usually when we think of it, we think of a double helix or the twisted ladder. But there's a lot of DNA in our body, and it codes for a lot of different character traits that we have. And so our cells are really, really tiny, which means that the DNA has to be packed very nicely in order to fit into the nucleus of the cell. And so if we look at how DNA is going to be packaged, we can see that our double helix can actually be wound up to form a bigger structure called a chromosome. Now, how we get to that chromosome is we're going to take our double helix DNA, and it's going to be wrapped around a protein called a histone. So that's actually going to be our first blank right here. So I'm going to go ahead and type in histone. And so our DNA is going to be tightly wound around these histones, and it's going to create a coiled fiber. So if I look at my diagram, once my DNA wraps around these histones, that coiled fiber is going to be called a chromatin. So I'm going to go ahead, highlight this, and fill in chromatin right here. So chromatin is actually what you see under the microscope whenever you see DNA inside of the nucleus. It doesn't look like a double helix. It just looks like a really dark blob inside the middle of the cell. And that's because that nucleus is filled with chromatin fibers. So the double helix is way too small for us to see underneath the regular microscope, but we can see where it's located inside that nucleus, and we know it's in a chromatin form. So from here, from our chromatin fiber, it's going to wind up again, and it's going to create something called a chromosome. So a chromosome just looks like a really big X. I like to call them fluffy X's. And in the middle, because you can see we have two parts of that chromosome, it's attached together in the middle by something called a centromere. And that's going to be important a little bit later on when we discuss the steps of mitosis. And so these chromosomes, DNA is not always in this chromosome form. It's only at certain times of the cell cycle. Usually, it's going to be in this chromatin form. And that's when we see it, under the microscope inside of the nucleus. So let's go ahead and go over a couple of key vocab words. So first off, let's go over this word diploid. So essentially what diploid means is that it's referring to the genetic information inside of an organism. So our cells have two ways to express genetic information. We can have half of our genetic information For example, what you might find in your sex cells, such as your sperm or your eggs, in order to give half of your genetic information to an offspring, or you could be a diploid and have a full set of genetic information because you received half of your genetic information from your mother and the other half from your father. So my definition for diploid is going to be a full set of genetic information given from two parents. So sometimes we express diploid as 2n. Okay, so just like how in algebra class you might have, x equals whatever, or maybe 4x equals whatever, a diploid organism is 2n. So n represents the amount of genetic information. So a haploid would be a half set of genetic information. So when we're talking about a half set of genetic information, we're talking about something that's going to be passed from parents to offspring. So you're only going to give half of your genetic information. You're not going to give all of it because you're not creating a clone of yourself when you're creating offspring. You're only going to give a half set of genetic information. And so we refer to that as 1n. So if we add up 1n plus 1n, that's how we get 2n. And that's how we get our diploid organisms. So we have two haploid cells, so a sperm and an egg, and when they unite, they're going to create a diploid organism. So our next sets of vocab have to do with our cells. So we have two major types of cells. We have a gamete, and then we have a somatic cell. So when we're talking about gametes, we're talking about our sex cells. Okay, so we have two types of sex cells. We have sperm and eggs, and these are haploid. Okay, so gametes are haploid. They have a half set of genetic information. Our somatic cell is going to be anything else besides a sex cell. Okay, so these are referred to as body cells. Okay, so anything that's not a gamete. Okay, so our skin cells, our liver cells, stomach cells, muscle cells, all of those things are somatic cells. So somatic cells are going to be diploid if we're talking about our genetic information. So if I come over here on the right, I can see that I have two cells at the top, two haploid cells, and I can see that when they're combined together, they create a diploid cell. And so this is very very casually drawn on what happens with the sperm and an egg. So I have a haploid cell that has these blue chromosomes inside of them, and I have this other haploid cell that has these red chromosomes inside of them, and they're going to combine together to create a diploid organism. Okay, so that's what we mean when we're talking about haploid and diploid. Now, different organisms have different chromosome numbers. For example, humans, we have 46 chromosomes. So that's 46 total chromosomes. That's our diploid number. So if I divide that in half, that means that I got 23 chromosomes from my mother and 23 chromosomes from my father. So my haploid number would be 23. My diploid number would be 46 because my diploid is my full set of genetic information, my total number of chromosomes. Haploid is only half of my genetic information, which is half of my chromosomes. So if I look at this table right here, we're looking at the table number of chromosomes in different species because different species do have different numbers of chromosomes. So I already went over what humans have. So next, let's look at a housefly. So for a housefly, it doesn't give me my diploid number, but it tells me my haploid number is 6. So that means that this housefly got 6 chromosomes from mom and 6 chromosomes from dad. So if I add those two numbers together, that means my diploid number is 12. Okay, so that housefly has 12 chromosomes total. So next, let's look at a monkey. Monkey, the haploid number is 21. So again, I do the same thing like I did with my housefly. I either multiply that by 2 or add it to 21. Okay, so 21 times 2 is going to be 42. All right, so now for my bat and my king crab. They give me the opposite. They give me my diploid number. So for my bat, 2n equals 44. I'm trying to figure out what n equals. So this is my full set of chromosomes for my bat. I need to figure out a half set. So all I need to do is take my 44 and divide by 2. Okay, so that gives me 22. So next for my king crab, 2n equals 208. I do the same thing. I take 208 and divide by 2, and n equals 104. All right, so take a couple of minutes, fill out the rest of these, and that way we could see if you have the correct answer.